With comic book movies on the rise in Hollywood and with the success of X-Men 2000, it was no surprise that a sequel film would soon go into production. And on May 2nd, 2003, 3 years after the first, X2 X-Men United was released in theaters. A continuation of the X-Men storyline and the second installment in a soon-to-be massive franchise. Of the three films, X-Men 2 is probably my favorite as I think it presents a great narrative that tackles important aspects of the X-Men world, specifically in the relationship between humans and mutants, while improving on many aspects of the first film. Having Stryker as the main antagonist, a human, as opposed to Magneto, a mutant, helped build the world of X-Men from the first film by just demonstrating the pure hatred for mutants from just a dude. The action scenes have greatly improved. I mean, the Nightcrawler opening is just so good. While most of the main characters returned, some unfortunately didn't, but I think this movie better handled the amount of characters since the groundwork was already built in the first film. And another returning party for the sequel was ToyBiz, delivering on a new assortment of movie merchandise. For X-Men 2, we got a much limited assortment of toys with a smaller variety of characters, but since it's not a lot, I'll just go over everything. Starting with the deluxe Poseable figures, we got one 13-inch figure and then three 12-inch figures. There was a 13-inch Wolverine, then 12-inch Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and what I think is a 12-inch Battle Action Wolverine. For playsets, we only got one this time around. We get an X2 branded X-Jet. Comparing this to the first movie's X-Jet, this one is more silver as opposed to the blue color of the first one. In the movie, the jet is gray, so this one is movie accurate. And finally, we have the 6-inch figures. ToyBiz did 2 waves of figures, but unlike X-Men 1 where we got so many different characters, this time around was very different. In Series 1, we got Optic Blast Cyclops, Super Poseable Nightcrawler, Battle Attack Logan, and Super Poseable Wolverine. Similar to the first movie's wave, I think this assortment was released prior to the movie's release, as these feature light spoilers with pretty generic or unrecognizable accessories, but this next wave features some more scene-specific moments. For Series 2, we got Cyclops, Super Poseable Iceman, Street Fight Logan, Magneto, and Claw Strike Wolverine. In this X2 line, we got a bunch of Wolverines with a couple of Cyclopses and 3 other characters. If I had to guess, maybe Wolverine and Cyclops were the most popular figures from the first movie, so as such they only made those 2 mostly. But at least we did get some new characters to the line such as Bobby Iceman and Nightcrawler. An unfortunate realization in retrospect, but maybe less is more, and these fewer releases granted ToyBiz more energy to perfect the ones that they did make. I actually have just about all of these movie figures, so what do you say we take a look at 20-year-old plastic figures and see how ToyBiz did the second time around? We're starting off the reviews with my personal favorite X-Man, Cyclops. Despite getting knocked out early in the film, ToyBiz took it in their own hands to do my boy justice. This is Optic Blast Cyclops, featuring a Cyclops figure with this large gun thing. This isn't referencing anything, it's just a large laser gun, but the Cyclops figure itself is sporting an X-Men black leather uniform. Let's start off with Scott, which I think looks pretty great. In terms of accuracy, it's a bit difficult since we don't get a perfect look at his outfit, since he's wearing a big coat over it, but it seems to be all black. But this figure has a really nice gray and light blue outline. He may not be accurate, but to be honest, this figure's suit does look really nice, and definitely a lot better than what's actually in the movie. This figure has a decent amount of articulation. Double jointed legs with ankle joint, foot hinge, a boot swivel, and thigh cut. Arms are also double jointed with a shoulder joint, bicep, forearm cut, and a hand and fingers hinge. There is a waist swivel, but something that's a little off, specifically with Cyclops and Bobby Iceman, is that they have an outstanding posture, but because of that, it makes him always looking upwards. It's just a strange quirk of the torso piece. Speaking of the torso, it doesn't have any articulation, but in Cyclops' case, it's probably due to the hidden electronics that I'll get to in a bit. And finally, we have the head, which isn't separate from the neck, so it all moves as one piece. Similar to the waist swivel, it moves diagonally, so he only really looks upwards. An interesting staple of the previous Cyclopses was the ability to remove his visor, and this figure continues that tradition. A quick look under the glasses and... oh god. One last note about the visor is that, at least for mine, they come off fairly easily, so be careful with it. Small accessories like these easily get lost once they fall off the desk and never to be seen again. Unless you have a cleared floor, in case they're fairly easy to find. To quickly mention likeness, I'd say it looks pretty accurate. Good job, ToyBiz. In the movie, his hair is more equally parted on both sides. This is something that the second Cyclops release did, but this figure has one strand going down. I'm not complaining about it, but it's just something I wanted to note. Earlier I mentioned electronics, and another ToyBiz specialty for Scott are light up features to simulate his laser eyes. This X2 figure is no exception. On his back is a large button that when pushed are supposed to light up his eyes, but I think mine are a bit worn down as it doesn't shine bright. Dim lights are a real problem for Cyclops over 50. To wrap up the review, I think he's surprisingly good. The torso and head movement thing are a little annoying, but I don't know, I just really like this suit. ToyBiz did Cyclops justice with this release, and he did not come alone. Included is this large gun with lots of wires and stuff. Obviously this thing doesn't appear in the movie, but it has some similarities to this other 2003 Optic Blast Cyclops figure that ToyBiz did, so I guess this is a remade version of that. Regardless, this accessory has great detail with the intricate wiring details on it. Included are 4 white and red ammo pieces that load into the barrel. You're supposed to press this button on the X logo, but I think mine's broken because the gun doesn't shoot, and so I guess they're just stuck in there. Regardless, I think this is a neat and surprisingly detailed accessory that could easily work as like background pieces for a training room or something if you really wanted it to. This Optic Blast Cyclops was a good offering, and definitely a nice upgrade for this version of the character. Like I said with the torso and head, that's just something you have to get used to, I guess. But besides that, I think this is a great figure. Thumbs up, says the reviewer. And now our first newcomer to the movie line. Here is Super Poseable Nightcrawler. A standout character in the film, and definitely a standout release from ToyBiz. Let's start with the action figure, which recreates his look from the film. Kurt is not wearing his comic book outfit, instead wearing a mismatched attire with some radical looking pants. Let's go over articulation. Starting with the legs, you get a thigh cut, double jointed knees, boot swivel, and very limited ankle and foot hinges. The arms have a ball joint shoulder, biceps, double jointed arms, wrist movement, with both a hand and fingers hinge. And finally, we have torso articulation. Not just the waist, but we do have an upper diaphragm cut. But unlike the other guys with good posture, Nightcrawler has that gamer posture, so he's always hunched over. His trench coat is made of a soft plastic material, so it doesn't really get in the way of any movement. An important part of Nightcrawler is his tail, which is here, and actually has a bendy wire in it, so you can pose it in any direction you want. But I do wish the tail was longer, as it doesn't stretch out as far as you'd want it to. Moving on to the head, which moves around with the neck. Not as one piece, but I don't know, it's hard to move one without moving the other. As for likeness, ToyBiz absolutely killed it, as I think this is probably the best likeness from the entire X2 movie wave. This figure is pretty good and a great addition to the movie collection. Kurt's accessory is an interesting one, as it's more of a diorama piece. From the scene where Jean and Storm find Nightcrawler, we have a buildable church rafter. I lost a couple pieces, so mine isn't complete, but you can still see what it should look like. But still, this set has incredible detail on both the wood planks and the big stained glass window. There's a clip on the back of the window in case you want to hang it on your wall or something. It reminds me of the stained glass window that comes with the movie Daredevil figure. As a complete offering, this super poseable Nightcrawler is pretty good, and has a surprisingly nice diorama piece if you're building a church for your action figures, while also giving us a brand new addition to the Foxverse X-Men characters. Good job, ToyBiz. The next figure in the spotlight is Battle Attack Logan and Wolf, but we'll start with Logan. This figure, and the wolf, is based on Logan's first scene in the film as he explores the seemingly abandoned Alakai Lake base. But to be fair, this overall look for Logan was also fairly prominent in the first film, albeit with some differences. Regardless, this figure has great detail, especially on the jacket and pants, not only detailing the zippers and seam lines but also the paintwork. It truly is amazing for the time it came out in. Something I think is really funny about this guy is his proportions. He has really long legs with a small torso. Maybe that's just to make him more hue accurate.
That's TTS, Tiny Torso Syndrome. Do you know that 1 in every Hugh Jackman suffers from this disorder?
Let's go over articulation, which follows a pretty simple layout. Double jointed arms, hand joint with a bicep swivel. Double jointed legs with a boot swivel and an ankle joint. Like with most Wolverine figures, this release does have a claw striking gimmick which does affect his articulation. His head, arms, and torso are ratcheted, so when you slide the notch on his back, his head and arms go berserk. You can't have a Logan figure without claws, and this figure gives you them. There's no interchangeable hands or retractable claw gimmick, so they are always out, and very susceptible to warping, so be careful with storage. As for likeness, I think it's fine, I guess. I think overall, this Logan figure is pretty good. But Logan was not alone in this offering, as he came with a wolf figure. I guess you can consider this a 2-pack. I'm 99% sure this is supposed to be the wolf from the same scene where Logan explores the abandoned lake lab, but that wolf is much more white and brown, and this one's definitely more gray. I think they hyper painted this wolf to the point where it just became a completely different color. As for articulation, the legs are pre-posed, but you can rotate them around. The front paw is in a mid-walking position, while the others are more normal stance. The only other articulation is the jaw, but my wolf here is a bit cross-eyed and his jaw isn't necessarily straight. He looks goofy, but that's just what makes him special. Logan's leather jacket look returned in the sequel film and for the sequel toy line, a tradition that would continue past ToyBiz and into the modern era of action figures. This X2 version is a massive improvement from the first release. A solid offering. And now it's time for my favorite figure of the line, the Super Poseable Wolverine. I'm not exactly sure what it is about this figure, but it just feels right. This is the X-Man. To me, this is the pinnacle of the ToyBiz X-Men movie figures, and in my opinion, the best 1/12 movie Wolverine figure. Well, until the new Deadpool and Wolverine version comes out, then he'll have some competition. Regardless of how you feel about the leather suits, ToyBiz captured a design almost perfectly. It has all the great orange detailing around the suit with the intricate line work, but this figure is missing the belts. So close to perfection. I mentioned this earlier, but perhaps this figure was designed based on concept art or just pre-production information, and then for the final release he ended up having a belt. Who knows? This is something that the second Wolverine figure did fix, but from what I've seen, this figure is not reusing the super posable body mold and is much more gimmicky. As for articulation, Wolverine doesn't get anything too crazy. The standard ToyBiz leg movements, thigh cut, double jointed knees, boot swivel, ankles and toes, double jointed arms, bicep cut, ball shoulder with a forearm swivel and a hand hinge. There's no torso articulation except for a waist swivel, but like Cyclops, because of his posture it moves sideways. But I don't know, it doesn't bother me as much here. The Wolverine head goes around super smoothly and isn't hindered by anything. This guy has no gimmicks whatsoever. Speaking of head, I think it looks pretty good, though I can't tell if he's smiling or very angry. You can't have a Wolverine without claws, and this figure has them. The claws are a tad shiny with this sort of plasticky reflective material and are pretty solid, so I don't think they can warp as easily as other Wolverine figures. Also, he has two different hands. One is a closed fist and the other is an open grabbing something hand, though he doesn't come with anything to actually hold. There's no movable fingers or anything, so these gestures are permanent. This base figure of Wolverine I think is just amazing. The missing belt is a little annoying, but I can look past that since ToyBiz nailed everything else. Obviously, more torso articulation would help the figure, but unfortunately nobody in this line got that privilege. To finish off the full set, Wolverine did come with an accessory, being this battle action base, which honestly reminds me of the logo reveal. There's a clip to hold the figure in place, and pegs at the bottom of the base. It has a small module screen with sticker details on it, something about select program and Wolverine, and all probably referencing the Danger Room. And then there's a notch on the back, so you can spin Wolverine around. Fun. Overall, a really solid offering that gives you, in my opinion, one of the best movie Wolverine action figures of all time. I wish when Hasbro did their anniversary line, they gave us Wolverine in this look so we can have a modern age action figure version of this iteration of Wolverine. The figure is outdated in a few regards, but I feel like it deserves its respect as being a great representation of Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine from this original trilogy. Next up, we have another Cyclops to take a look at. Here is Cyclops with light up Optic blast and clear batons, or just super Poseable Cyclops if you're nasty. This is our second and final release of Cyclops for the X-Men 2 movie line, and he is more movie accurate than the first. In the film, while Professor X is visiting Magneto, Cyclops is wearing this large black trench coat, and his suit is much more of a darker blue than the light blue colors that the first wave had. And he kind of looks like Neo from The Matrix. While the suit is more movie accurate, I think the light blue and white outline on the old suit looks better than the dark blue outline. Let's take a look at articulation. I'm pretty sure the torso and legs are reused from the other Cyclops, so they have the same articulation scheme. The legs are double jointed with a toe and foot hinge, boot swivel, and a thigh cut. The torso doesn't have any movement besides the waist due to the returning light up system, and that posture thing is still in effect. But since he has the trench coat, it's a little less obvious. Speaking of the trench coat, it's made of a soft plastic material, so it won't hinder any movement. And the new arms are sculpted to feature the trench coat arms over his suit, which means it must be like really cold in that prison to be wearing all that. The arms have shoulder movement, bicep cut, double jointed arms, forearm swivel, and a hand and finger hinge system. Last but not least, we have the head, which I think looks pretty good. It has that parted hairstyle that was featured in the marketing and has that likeness as good as it probably can get. Nice job. Now, like the Cyclops before him, he has a removable visor. Oh, this one doesn't come off. Well, now I kind of feel bad for him. The non-removable visor, accompanied with the very restrained head movement, is all most likely due to the light-up system. On his back is a large mysterious button that when pushed is supposed to light up his eyes. But I couldn't get mine to work. Sorry, Scott. Regardless, this is still a pretty solid Cyclops figure and obviously is more screen accurate than his predecessor. While I do like the updated face sculpt, I also like the first figure's suit more, so I guess it's more down to your preference. But while that Cyclops came with a large gun, this one comes with clear batons. Yeah, he comes with the clear batons from the guards he beats up while waiting for Professor X. That's kinda cool, I guess. Mine are a little yellow due to the 20 years since it was manufactured, but if you had like security guard figures, it'd make a neat scene, I suppose. While Scott doesn't really need batons, it is a neat accessory, though I wish we had a Lady Deathstrike to put him up against. To wrap this up, this is a cool Cyclops figure, and I'm glad he got another one. For one of ToyBiz's last outings with the X-Men movies, I'm happy to see they made another great Cyclops figure. While I like the choices from the first release, this one is still a solid offering, and of course is screen accurate. And the batons are cool as well. For our second new character to the ToyBiz movie line, here's Bobby Iceman, or just Iceman, or just Bobby. I don't know, I like calling him Bobby Iceman. He's dressed in his X-Men uniform that unfortunately only appeared in the second film. ToyBiz recreated Bobby Iceman's suit with that same high quality detailing featured throughout this line, which looks great. To go over articulation, he's got basically the same system as the other Cyclops figures and the same problems, but we'll get into that. For instance, he has your standard ToyBiz foot hinge, ankle joint, boot swivel, thigh cut, and double jointed legs. But his legs only really extend sideways and can't really move forwards all that much. Arms follow a standard ToyBiz layout with shoulders, bicep cut, elbows, forearm movement, and a hand crunch. He does have a waist swivel, but that's his only torso articulation. It moves as one big piece, and I mean, this looks pretty insane. This isn't really held by his neck and head, which makes him look like he's tucking his chin in. You can move the head around, but mine has some paint marks there, so I just kind of leave it be. As for the face sculpt, I think it's great. There's definitely a Shawn Ashmore likeness, but I don't know. I feel like this figure makes him look a little bit younger than he actually does in the film. Bobby Iceman does not come alone, and actually comes with some ice-based accessories. We get this massive ice gun. I suppose it's to look like he's shooting a massive ice beam or something. Its large size is most likely due to the electronics inside of it, which when you slide his hand in is supposed to hit the small button inside and it light up. His second accessory is this ice wall from the infamous scene in the mansion where Logan first sees Stryker. Is what I first thought this was, but it's actually a real ice tray mold, so you can make a real life ice wall. And I gotta admit, this is pretty cool. Pun intended. But I mean, it can also work as the ice wall from the Stryker scene. Overall, this is a great offering for a new character to the line. I'm happy Bobby Iceman got a figure, and despite some weird articulation quirks, it's still a fun figure. If you'd like, you can pair him with the Rogue figure from the first film, but she's very short standing next to him. Of course, a better torso articulation scheme would have been great, but I still think despite that, we got a pretty cool figure and an ice-solid representation of Bobby Iceman, specifically from his appearance in X-Men 2. His inclusion in this wave does make me wish for a Pyro figure, but alas, we must move on. And we must actually move on. We got one more figure to look at. Our final figure for this video is Magneto, with a super secret hidden base hideout door. Based on his accessory, this figure is referencing the moment towards the end of the movie where Eric opens up the evil Cerebro door to save Charles. In terms of costume, this is the same outfit he wore in the first film, and it looks accurate, so great. But since we got it in the first film, here's the first Magneto next to the new one. It's insane what just a 3-year difference can make. X2 Magneto is not only taller, but it just looks way better, though the soft goods cape on the old one is cool. While a lot of things got upgraded between releases, I'm happy to report that Eric's massive hands are still present in this release. That's just amazing. Moving on from the hands, let's go over articulation. There is both foot and toe hinges, boot swivel, single jointed knees, and a thigh cut. For the arms, there's a shoulder hinge, bicep cut, single jointed elbows, and hand and finger hinges. The torso only has the waist swivel with a soft plastic cape attached at the top. Then we have the head, which rotates around freely. The first Magneto release didn't have an Ian McKellen likeness and instead just looked like an old man, but this Magneto has quite the likeness. Mine has a dot on his nose, so don't mind that. For the X-Men 2 line, Magneto definitely got an upgrade, both in articulation and likeness, but alas, he didn't come alone. Included are 2 accessories. One is his helmet with screen-accurate paint details, and the aforementioned evil Cerebro door. It's probably intended, but the weathering details look like someone just went crazy with a paintbrush, and I don't know, I don't mind it. It's supposed to look run down and old, so whatever gets the job done. On the bottom of the base, there is a large mysterious button that when pushed, opens the door. When the doors open, these large extension pieces pop out, which you can use to close the door, if you so desire. Interestingly, the actual door is made of a fabric material, so I guess that they can easily roll up the doors, but I'd imagine doing that all the time would eventually cause it to rip, so be careful. Magneto with evil Cerebro door is a nice offering. Like I said, he's a worthy upgrade and comes with a nice accessory piece that can honestly work as a diorama set if you really wanted it to. Overall, that was pretty good. Good job, Magneto, you and your big ass hands, I love it. X2 X-Men United was a great step forward from X-Men 1, and the same can be applied to these ToyBiz figures. The improvement from the first film's figures in 2000 to these in 2003 is spectacular. These figures feature great detail and have much needed improved articulation for these action-packed characters. It seems that since the first film's toy release, they very much downscaled the play features, instead opting for gimmick accessories as opposed to gimmick figures, which I think was a great choice and helps these figures age better than those from the first film. I really wish they gave us more characters who desperately needed an upgrade. Characters like Mystique, Storm, Jean Grey, and even newer additions like Pyro and Lady Deathstrike. All important characters in the film and would have been great inclusions with this better articulation scheme. To answer my original question of how did ToyBiz do the second time around, I think they succeeded their original toy line for X-Men 1 and gave us a pretty great 6-inch line of action figures. By today's standards, the articulation scheme may not seem super poseable, but comparing them to their predecessor, I'd argue they are extremely poseable. The ToyBiz era of X-Men movie figures concludes with X-Men 2, as Hasbro takes on the license for its third film and numerous Wolverine spin-offs, but that's a topic for another day. But for now, in my opinion, these X2 X-Men United figures stand as some of the best representations of the original X-Men movie trilogy.
Easy there, buddy.
You picked a bad day to come sneaking up on me, bub.